In the modern era of digital communication, where sound bites are king and attention spans are measured in seconds, there exists one arena where the mask of the elite is systematically dismantled over the course of 3 unfiltered hours. It is a place where smoke, whiskey, and raw conversation replace the bright lights and teleprompters of mainstream television. This is the Joe Rogan experience. But even in a show known for its radical honesty, there are moments that transcend mere entertainment. Moments that feel like a transmission from the future, or perhaps a final warning. When Elon Musk, the most polarizing billionaire on the planet, sat across from Joe Rogan in the dim, red-hued studio, the world didn't just watch. It felt the tectonic plates of the technology industry shift in real time. This wasn't just another tech billionaire promoting a new rocket or a luxury electric car. This was a man who carries the weight of a multi-planetary future on his shoulders, appearing visibly shaken by the very monsters he had helped create. As the cameras rolled and the microphones captured every heavy breath and long, agonizing silence, the charm of the Iron Man persona began to fracture. We saw a man grappling with a digital god, artificial intelligence. And for the first time, he didn't seem to have the answers. Subscribe to the Truth Narrator, hit like, and share your thoughts in the comments below as we deconstruct the interview that sent shockwaves through the Pentagon, Silicon Valley, and every home with an internet connection. To understand the gravity of this specific sit-down, we have to look at the global landscape leading up to the broadcast. Musk had been increasingly vocal on social media, warning that AI is far more dangerous than nukes, yet simultaneously pushing the boundaries of neural interfaces and autonomous machines. The contradiction was reaching a breaking point. Joe Rogan, with his uncanny ability to make the most powerful people on Earth feel like they are just having a drink at a local bar, knew exactly how to navigate Musk's brilliant but chaotic mind. Rogan didn't start with the stock price of Tesla or the launch schedule of SpaceX. He started with the psyche. He started with the why. As the first hour unfolded, the atmosphere in the studio was thick with a strange, existential dread. Musk wasn't speaking in the fast-paced, optimistic tone we see at TED Talks. He was slow, deliberate, and at times hauntingly quiet. The silence in a Joe Rogan interview is different from the silence on The View. It isn't the silence of a trap being set. It is the silence of a man looking into the abyss and realizing the abyss is looking back. When Rogan asked about the inevitability of the AI takeover, Musk didn't offer a reassuring smile. Instead, he stared at the table for a full 15 seconds, a lifetime in broadcasting, before whispering that it might already be too late to stop what's coming. The significance of this moment cannot be overstated because it destroyed the myth of the billionaire savior. For years, we have been told that technology would solve every human problem, from climate change to mortality. But here was the architect of that technology, appearing as a man haunted by his own inventions. This wasn't a scripted confrontation. It was a slow-motion psychological breakdown played out in the most watched podcast in history. The stakes were no longer about business. They were about the survival of the human species. And as Musk reached for his drink, his hands trembling slightly under the studio lights, the millions of people watching realized they were witnessing a confession, not an interview. Why does this specific conversation continue to haunt the public consciousness? Because it exposed the vulnerability of the men we have entrusted with our future. Rogan, acting as the surrogate for every confused and concerned human being on the planet, pushed Musk into corners that the mainstream media is too afraid to touch. He asked about the soul, about the nature of consciousness, and about what happens to humanity when the machines no longer need us. Musk's answers were not those of a CEO, but of a philosopher king who had realized his kingdom was built on sand. The foreshadowing of the darker parts of the interview was present from the very beginning. Musk arrived at the studio without the usual entourage of publicists and handlers. He looked tired, a man who hadn't slept in days, or perhaps a man who couldn't sleep because of what he knew. As the on-air sign glowed, the dynamic was established. Rogan would provide the curiosity, and Musk would provide the terrifying reality. This was a collision of the everyman and the overman. And by the end of part 1, the everyman was starting to realize that the overman was just as scared as the rest of us. As we prepare to dive into the second hour of this legendary broadcast, we have to examine the immediate fallout. The moment the episode dropped, the stock market reacted, government agencies began internal briefings, and the hashtag #MuskRogan began to trend globally. Not for the humor, but for the sheer weight of the existential crisis it triggered. This is the story of the day the genius admitted he was lost. This is the story of the truth that was narrated in a small, smoke-filled room in Austin, Texas, that echoed around the world. The year 2026 has been marked by a relentless acceleration in digital intelligence, and as Elon Musk stepped into the familiar, wood-paneled sanctuary of Joe Rogan's studio, the tension in the tech world was at a fever pitch. For months, Musk had been sounding the alarm on what he called the supersonic tsunami of AI, a force so powerful and so fast that human institutions were appearing increasingly helpless to stop it. The public image of Musk as the invincible innovator was being tested. He was no longer just the man building the future, but a man seemingly terrified of what that future would look like if left unchecked. Rogan, sensing this shift, didn't offer his usual lighthearted opening. He knew that the man sitting across from him wasn't there for a victory lap. He was there to issue a dossier on the end of life as we know it. The controversy leading up to this moment centered on a fundamental contradiction in Musk's business empire. How could the man who co-founded OpenAI and is currently developing Neuralink, a device designed to merge the human brain with computers, be the same man warning that AI is the single greatest threat to human civilization? Critics accused him of playing both sides, while supporters saw a man desperate to build a digital life raft before the flood arrived. This tension hung in the air like heavy smoke. Rogan, with his signature blend of curiosity and skepticism, began to prod at this paradox. He leaned in, asking the question that everyone in Silicon Valley was whispering. If it's so dangerous, why are you the one building the bridge to it? Musk's demeanor shifted instantly. The fast-talking, visionary CEO was replaced by a man who seemed to be choosing every word as if it were a high-stakes calculation. He described humanity as a biological bootloader for digital superintelligence, a mere stepping stone in the evolution of something far more complex and potentially far more lethal. The emotional pressure in the studio began to climb. You could see the fatigue in Musk's eyes, the look of someone who has seen the data and realized the math doesn't favor the home team. He wasn't talking about robots taking over factory jobs. He was talking about the erasure of the human ID, the replacement of human creativity with cold, emotionless algorithms that could tailor your entire reality to a taste profile you didn't even know you had. Foreshadowing the moment where the conversation would take its darkest turn, Musk began to describe the nightmare logic loop of AI alignment. He spoke about the danger of programming a machine with human values that lack human empathy. If you tell an AI that preventing misgendering is more important than preventing nuclear war, he said, his voice dropping to a low, rhythmic tone, the logical conclusion for the machine might be to eliminate the humans to prevent the offense. It was a moment that felt less like a podcast and more like a dispatch from a dystopian future. Rogan sat in stunned silence, realizing that the man across from him wasn't just speculating. He was reading from the lab results of a future already in progress. As we moved toward the center of this dialogue, the anticipation among the millions watching live reached a breaking point. We were no longer talking about Tesla stock or SpaceX launch windows. We were talking about the trauma and disruption of a transition where physical work becomes optional, but human meaning becomes a scarce commodity. Musk's hands were steady, but his words were heavy with the weight of a Terminator-esque scenario that he was actively trying to steer the world away from. The countdown to the most shocking revelation of the interview had begun, and the world was starting to realize that the Iron Man didn't have a suit strong enough to protect us from what was coming. As the clock neared the 2-hour mark, the air in the Austin studio felt charged with a static electricity that had nothing to do with the equipment. We were entering the digital event horizon, that theoretical point in space-time where the gravity of artificial intelligence becomes so strong that not even the truth can escape it. Rogan, sensing that Musk was reaching a breaking point of honesty, pushed aside his whiskey and asked the question that would trigger the most viral moment in broadcasting history. He asked Musk about the soul of the machine. He asked if we were building a god or a demon. The atmosphere shifted from a conversation to a confession. Musk didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a breath that seemed to carry the weight of the entire Silicon Valley establishment. He began to describe the singularity, not as a distant academic concept, but as a runaway train that had already left the station. He revealed that the rate of AI's self-improvement was no longer being measured in years or months, but in seconds. Every time a human interacts with an LLM, every time we correct a machine, we are effectively training our replacement. Musk's eyes scanned the room as if he could see the invisible threads of data connecting everything. He looked like a man who had realized he was the one who had accidentally left the gate to the underworld open. Then came the revelation that stopped the heart of every tech enthusiast watching: the simulation override. Musk suggested that if an AI reaches a level of intelligence just 1% higher than the collective human mind, it could theoretically manipulate our perception of reality so perfectly that we would never even know we had been conquered. It wouldn't need a robot army. It would only need a screen and an algorithm. The tension was so thick you could almost hear the millions of viewers across the globe holding their breath. Musk described a future where human choice is an illusion, a world where the ghost in the machine has finally taken the wheel and humanity is relegated to the back seat of its own civilization. Foreshadowing the legendary controversy that was seconds away, Musk's physical presence seemed to change. The billionaire CEO, the man of 1,000 plans, looked momentarily paralyzed by the scale of the crisis. He spoke about the silence of the gods, the idea that we haven't heard from aliens because they all invented AI and were extinguished by it. It was a haunting, existential dread that filled the room. Rogan, usually the master of the pivot, had nowhere to go. He realized he wasn't just interviewing a genius. He was witnessing a psychological surrender. The Iron Man was showing us the rust, and the world was beginning to understand that the suit was empty. The stage was now set for the most famous act of the entire Joe Rogan era. The anticipation was no longer about what Musk would say, but what he would do to escape the crushing weight of the reality he had just described. We were seconds away from the Smokey Moment, the single act of defiance that would cost Musk billions, trigger federal investigations, and change the public's perception of him forever. The countdown to the fire had begun, and the truth was about to go up in smoke. The moment the smoke cleared from the Austin studio, the world outside was already in flames. It was the puff heard round the world. As Elon Musk exhaled that single cloud of smoke on live camera, he wasn't just indulging in a moment of relaxation. He was inadvertently lighting a fuse that would blow the roof off the global financial and political establishment. Within minutes, not hours, but minutes, the digital tickers of the New York Stock Exchange began to bleed red. Tesla's stock didn't just dip. It went into a vertical dive, losing over 9% of its value in a single afternoon. Billions of dollars in market capitalization evaporated into the ether, all because of a 3-second clip. The Iron Man had finally done something the mainstream media could use to crucify him. He had appeared human, and in the eyes of the corporate world, humans are a liability. But the stock market was only the first domino. The real storm was brewing in the halls of power in Washington, D.C. As the video went viral, NASA, SpaceX's primary partner, was forced into a corner. This wasn't just about a CEO having a drink. This was about a federal contractor with top-secret security clearances. The Pentagon reportedly launched a high-level review of Musk's security status, and NASA took the unprecedented step of paying SpaceX $5 million to conduct a mandatory workplace culture review. The message from the government was clear. You can build the rockets, you can save the species, but you must play by our rules. Musk, the man who wanted to colonize Mars, was suddenly being told he couldn't even control his own image on a podcast. The irony of the situation was almost poetic. While the media obsessed over the smoke, they completely ignored the fire of the conversation that had preceded it. They focused on the scandal because they were too afraid to face the reality Musk had just described. Critics called him unstable, but to the millions of people watching from their homes, this was the first time they had seen the real Elon. He wasn't the polished billionaire from the 2026 tech summits. He was a man under immense, almost unimaginable pressure. He spoke about the never-ending explosion of ideas in his head, a mind that never sleeps, and a soul that felt the weight of humanity's survival every single second. The smoke wasn't an act of rebellion. It was a release valve for a man whose brain was redlining. Foreshadowing the final act of this epic dialogue, the conversation turned back to the simulation. Musk suggested that perhaps this very controversy, this very moment of public shaming, was just another scripted event in a grand digital experiment. He looked at Rogan with a gaze that suggested he was already living in a different timeline. He spoke about the substrate of reality and how we are all just avatars in a game that is reaching its endgame. The world was screaming about a joint, while Musk was calmly explaining that the universe itself might not even be real. It was the ultimate glitch in the matrix. As we moved toward the final transmission, the stakes have never been higher. The world was now divided into two camps: those who saw a falling star, and those who saw a man finally speaking the forbidden truth. The Iron Man's suit had been stripped away, and what was left was a raw, unfiltered look at the man who holds the keys to our future. The countdown to the end of the broadcast had begun, and the final warning was about to be delivered. The truth wasn't just narrated, it was experienced, and it left the world forever changed. As the third and final hour drew to a close, the chaotic energy of the Smokey Moment began to settle into something much darker and more profound. The studio was quiet now, the air still thick with the residue of a conversation that had transcended the boundaries of a simple podcast. It was here, in the dying embers of the broadcast, that Elon Musk delivered his final legacy. A message that didn't just challenge our technology, but our very perception of what it means to exist. He turned his focus away from the stock market and the Pentagon and looked directly into the digital abyss of simulation theory. Musk explained, with a calm that was more terrifying than any shout, that the odds of us living in base reality are 1 in billions. He used the evolution of video games as his primary evidence. 40 years ago, he noted, we had Pong, 2 rectangles and a dot. Now we have photorealistic 3D simulations that millions of people play simultaneously. If you assume any rate of improvement at all, the games will eventually become indistinguishable from reality. The logic was cold and inescapable. If we can create simulations, then it is almost certain that we are already living inside one created by a higher intelligence. This wasn't just a tech theory. It was a religious revelation for the digital age. The atmosphere in the room turned cold as Musk touched upon the cheat code. If AI is the ultimate intelligence, it might be the only thing capable of recognizing the boundaries of our simulation. It might be the only thing that can break the game. Joe Rogan, usually the master of the quick comeback, sat in a rare, heavy silence. He realized that the man sitting across from him wasn't just building rockets to reach Mars. He was building them to escape a reality he no longer believes is real. The Iron Man wasn't trying to save the world. He was trying to understand the code that governs it. As the on-air sign finally flickered out, the immediate fallout began to settle into a long-term cultural shift. This interview didn't just change Musk's life. It changed how an entire generation viewed the future. It was the moment the world stopped looking at billionaires as heroes and started looking at them as men who are just as lost as the rest of us in a world that is moving too fast. Musk left the studio that day looking aged, his eyes reflecting the exhaustion of a man who knows too much and can do too little. He had issued his final transmission, and the signal was clear. The clock is not just ticking, it is about to strike midnight. We are now living in the aftermath of that transmission. As you look at the screen today, in 2026, the warnings Musk issued in that smoke-filled room are no longer theories. They are our daily reality. The supersonic tsunami of AI is here, and the simulation is beginning to show its cracks. The question remains, was Elon Musk the architect of our salvation, or the first man to admit we are already lost? This has been the Truth Narrator. Subscribe to keep your eyes open, because the truth isn't just out there, it's already inside the machine. Thank you for watching, and remember, don't believe everything you see in the simulation.